On a busy city street in broad daylight, an officer pulls over a car for what seems like a routine stop. But within seconds, it's clear this isn't about traffic laws, it's about ego. The cop leans into the window, smirking, barking orders with a tone that drips arrogance. He thinks he's in control, flexing his authority like he's untouchable. Passers-by slow down, sensing something's off. Phones come out, cameras rolling. The driver? Calm. Too calm. His steady eyes suggest he's not the average citizen the cop thinks he can bully. The officer keeps pushing, raising his voice, even threatening an arrest. The crowd murmurs, "Why isn't the man scared?" What no one knows yet, not even the officer, is that the civilian sitting in that car is far from helpless. In fact, he's someone the cop should never have messed with. Officer Daniels strutted through his patrol shift like the city belonged to him. Broad shoulders, mirrored sunglasses, and a swagger that screamed authority, he was the type of cop who loved flashing his badge just to remind people who held the power. Daniels wasn't looking for criminals that afternoon, he was looking for control. That's when he spotted a black sedan idling too long at a green light. The driver, a man in plain clothes with sharp eyes and a calm expression, didn't look rattled by Daniels' glare. That only made him more suspicious. With a smirk, Daniels flicked on his siren, pulling the car over with unnecessary drama. "License and registration," Daniels barked, striding up to the window like he was approaching an enemy. The driver looked up slowly, his face unreadable. He handed over his documents without a word, his movements smooth and deliberate. Daniels didn't like that. Most people fumbled nervously under his gaze. This man was too calm, too steady. "You got an attitude problem, pal?" Daniels snapped, leaning closer into the window. "No, officer," the man replied evenly, his tone measured. "Just complying with your request." The answer, respectful but unshaken, only fueled Daniels' irritation. He wasn't used to being spoken to like an equal. He was used to people stuttering, apologizing, begging. But this guy? He looked like he had nothing to fear. Daniels glanced at the registration again. Something about it felt off. Not fake, but different. Special. He couldn't put his finger on it. "You from around here?" Daniels pressed, narrowing his eyes. "Passing through," the driver said simply. The crowd on the sidewalk began to notice. A couple of bystanders slowed down, watching the interaction. Someone already had their phone out, recording. Daniels thrived on that attention. He puffed his chest and raised his voice louder than necessary, making sure everyone knew who was in charge. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. The driver hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, without protest, he opened the door and stepped out. He was taller than Daniels expected, with a quiet presence that carried more weight than shouting ever could. His stance wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't submissive either. It was balanced, controlled. Daniels circled him like a wolf sizing up prey. "What's in the trunk? Drugs? Weapons? You looking for trouble?" The man locked eyes with him, calm but firm. "I suggest you think very carefully about your next move, officer." The words were quiet, almost polite, but they struck Daniels like a challenge. The crowd stirred, sensing something big was about to happen. Daniels smirked, mistaking confidence for weakness. He didn't know he was standing toe-to-toe with someone far outside his league. Because the man he was trying to intimidate wasn't a helpless civilian. He was an undercover FBI agent, one who had just been forced to break cover. Officer Daniels paced around the sedan like a predator circling its prey. His hand hovered near his holstered weapon, not because he needed it, but because he liked reminding people it was there. The undercover FBI agent, known only to Daniels as the quiet driver, stood motionless beside the car, his posture steady, his gaze unwavering. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Daniels sneered, yanking open the driver's door and rifling through the glove compartment without permission. "Calm face, smooth answers, like you've got nothing to hide." "But I can smell it." "You're hiding something." The crowd thickened on the sidewalk. Phones lifted higher, recording every second. A mother tugged her child closer, whispering, "Stay back." An older man muttered, "That cop's about to make a fool of himself." The driver remained composed. "Officer, I've complied with every request. There's no need to escalate this further." Daniels slammed the glove box shut, the loud crack making several bystanders flinch. "Don't tell me how to do my job," he barked. "You don't get to decide what's necessary." "I do." He stepped closer, chest puffed, nose inches from the man's face. "You think staying calm makes you look smart? Makes you look in control? Newsflash, buddy, I'm the only authority here. You're nothing." The driver's jaw tightened, but his voice never wavered. "You're making a mistake." Daniels laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Mistake? No, son. The mistake was you stopping in my city. You think those papers you handed me mean anything? Fake ID, probably. You think you're slick, but I've dealt with your type before." He turned to the crowd, raising his voice. "See this guy? Acting innocent. But I know his kind. Always pretending, always hiding. Probably some punk thinking he's above the law." The crowd murmured. Some shook their heads, others smirked, waiting for the officer to trip over his own arrogance. Daniels grabbed the man by the arm, spinning him toward the car. "Hands on the hood! Now!" The driver allowed himself to be turned but spoke calmly. "Officer, you're interfering with something you don't understand. Last warning, back off." The warning only fueled Daniel's ego. He shoved the man harder against the car. "Is that a threat? You threatening me?" His hand snapped to his cuffs, metal clicking as he yanked them out. "You're under arrest for resisting authority." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. A teenager whispered, "This dude has no idea who he's messing with." The driver exhaled slowly, his patience thinning. His voice dropped lower, sharper now. "I strongly suggest you reconsider." But Daniels wasn't listening. He was drunk on power, high on the sound of his own voice. "I don't reconsider. I decide. And you," he yanked the man's arm, preparing to snap the cuffs around his wrist, "are done." The driver finally moved, not in panic, not in violence, but with controlled precision. In one swift motion, he twisted his shoulder free, stepped back, and reached into his jacket. The crowd gasped, expecting a fight. Instead, a leather wallet snapped open. Inside, gleaming under the sunlight, was a gold badge. The letters stamped across it silenced the entire street. FBI. Daniels froze. His smug grin evaporated. His hand, still holding the cuffs, trembled. The agent locked eyes with him, voice cold, commanding now. "Officer Daniels. You've just interfered with an active federal operation." The crowd erupted, shouts, cheers, and laughter filling the air. Dozens of phones zoomed in on the badge, on the stunned expression plastered across the once arrogant cop's face. Daniels opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time all day, he realized he wasn't the one in control. The street fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of engines idling and the distant chatter of onlookers. Officer Daniels stared at the badge as though it were a mirage, his brain struggling to process what his eyes already knew. FBI, he stammered, his swagger collapsing like a house of cards. The undercover agent held the badge steady, his gaze fixed on Daniels with unshakable authority. "Special Agent Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation," he said, voice calm but edged with steel. "You've just interfered with a federal surveillance operation. You're obstructing justice. Do you understand what that means, Officer Daniels?" Gasps echoed through the crowd. Phones angled higher, capturing every word. Someone laughed out loud, unable to contain themselves. "Yo, he messed with the wrong guy." Daniels blinked rapidly, sweat gathering at his temples. His hand still clutched the handcuffs, but now they felt like a pair of shackles meant for him instead of his target. I didn't know, he stammered. You didn't? Why didn't you just say? Agent Carter snapped the badge shut and slipped it back into his jacket with controlled precision. His movements were sharp, deliberate, a stark contrast to Daniel's fumbling panic. Because, officer, undercover operations don't work if I announce myself to every uniform who decides to play tough guy. The crowd burst into chuckles. Someone shouted, he schooled you, man. Another voice added, karma came quick today. Daniel's face burned crimson, his jaw clenching as he tried to salvage what little dignity he had left. Look, I was just doing my job. You look suspicious. Suspicious? Carter stepped closer, his tone cutting. What you saw was a citizen cooperating with every order you gave. What you did was abuse your authority, escalate without cause, and nearly compromise a federal case. The words hit like a hammer, each one stripping Daniels of the power he thought he had. The phone zoomed in on his reddening face, immortalizing every second of his humiliation. Carter leaned in, his voice low enough that only Daniels could hear the next line, though the cameras caught the intensity in his eyes. If this footage reaches the Bureau before I report it myself, your career isn't just over, it's going to be remembered as a cautionary tale. Daniels swallowed hard, his bravado shattered. He glanced at the crowd, at the dozens of witnesses, the dozens of cameras, the dozens of futures in which his downfall was already viral. The agent straightened his suit jacket and turned to leave, his composure unbroken. Next time you put on that badge, he said over his shoulder, remember it's supposed to stand for protection, not intimidation. The crowd erupted, cheers, claps, and whistles filling the air. Some even chanted, FBI. FBI, as Agent Carter walked calmly back to his car. Daniels stood frozen, his cuffs dangling uselessly in his hand. For the first time, he understood what it felt like to be powerless, to be on the other end of authority. And thanks to the countless phones recording every humiliating second, the whole world was about to see it too. Officer Daniels stood frozen on the sidewalk, his authority shattered, his face pale under the weight of humiliation. The handcuffs he had once wielded like a weapon now dangled uselessly in his grip. All around him, the crowd buzzed with energy, laughter, shouts, and the glow of phone screens capturing every second of his downfall. Man, this is going viral tonight, a teenager exclaimed, already typing furiously on his phone. Another bystander grinned. Instant karma. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. Agent Carter didn't bask in the cheers or gloating. He simply adjusted his jacket, gave Daniels one last look, a mix of disappointment and warning, and slid back into his sedan. The car pulled away smoothly, leaving the arrogant cop stranded in the wreckage of his own ego. By the time Daniels returned to the precinct, the video had already spread across social media like wildfire. The clip had everything: a cocky officer abusing his power, a calm civilian flipping the script, and the jaw-dropping moment the FBI badge appeared. Millions of views stacked up within hours, hashtags like #InstantKarma, #FBIVsCop, and #AbuseOfPower dominating timelines. The police chief's office was waiting when Daniels walked in. The chief sat stiffly behind his desk, phone in hand, the viral video paused mid-frame, Daniels' shocked face frozen on screen. Care to explain this? The chief asked, his voice like stone. Daniels stammered, searching for excuses. He didn't identify himself. How was I supposed to know? I was just what? The chief cut in, eyes narrowing. Harassing an innocent man? Abusing your authority in broad daylight? Compromising a federal operation? He slammed the phone onto the desk. The Bureau called me personally. Do you have any idea how much damage you've done? Daniels swallowed hard, but the words wouldn't come. His usual bravado had evaporated, leaving nothing but shame. You're suspended effective immediately, the chief said flatly. Internal Affairs will review this. And frankly, Daniels, you should start looking for another line of work. Because once this video finishes its run, you won't be wearing a badge in this city or anywhere else. Daniels left the office in silence, his career crumbling around him. Outside the station, a group of reporters had already gathered, microphones ready, cameras flashing. The viral clip had turned him into the face of corruption overnight. Meanwhile, Agent Carter resumed his undercover mission as though nothing had happened. For him, it was just another day, another reminder of why integrity mattered more than authority. He never looked for applause, but the internet crowned him a hero anyway. Memes, headlines, and reaction videos painted him as the calm professional who stood tall against abuse of power. The moral was clear to everyone who watched: true strength doesn't come from loud voices, flashing lights, or waving a badge. It comes from discipline, justice, and knowing when to stand firm. And Officer Daniels? He became the perfect example of what happens when arrogance collides with accountability, forever remembered as the cop who got schooled by the FBI. And there you have it. Officer Daniels thought he could flex his authority, but in the end, arrogance met instant karma. The undercover FBI agent reminded everyone what true power looks like: calm, controlled, and rooted in justice. Stories like this remind us that abusing a badge doesn't make you strong, it only exposes your weakness. Authority without respect is nothing. Backhand index pointing right. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more shocking real-life dramas. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you witnessed this scene unfold? Drop your answer in the comments below. Because one thing's for sure, karma doesn't miss.